She didn't see me when she laughed. That's how I knew she wasn't sorry. Not even a little. Her hand brushed his wrist, not by accident, and she tilted her head in that way she used to do when she wanted me to feel like the only man in the room. Only now I was 3 feet away. Invisible. I wasn't supposed to be at La Vellum that night. I'd canceled the reservation 3 weeks ago, after Margot claimed she had migraine. And yet here she was, dressed in the same red velvet dress I once told her made her look like a fire I wanted to burn in. Now she was burning for someone else. The maitre d' had seated them with theatrical flair, not knowing he was casting a live betrayal play. And I had the best seat in the house. Except I wasn't alone. The man across from me wasn't drinking his wine. He was watching them too. I didn't recognize him, at first, until he leaned toward me and whispered, without breaking his gaze. "Yours too." It hit me like a slap. I nodded, slowly. He didn't blink, just adjusted his cufflink and muttered, "I figured. She's wearing his favorite color. Told me red was too bold for dinner." We sat like that for maybe 20 minutes. Not speaking, not eating, just breathing in the performance we never bought tickets for. I learned his name later, Jackson. But in that moment, we were 2 men sharing a funeral no one else knew was happening. When Reed reached across the table and touched her fingers, Margot didn't pull back. That's when Jackson stood up. I caught his arm. "Wait." He looked at me like a man on the edge of flame. "What are we waiting for?" "Timing." He sat down again. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe rage, maybe heartbreak, maybe the sheer absurdity of watching your marriage rot beside a $60 plate of risotto. But I signaled the waiter. "Send over a bottle of their favorite," I said. "Compliments of a gentleman at table 4. The waiter raised an eyebrow, but complied. I watched the bottle arrive at their table like a messenger of war. Margot looked confused, then curious. Then she turned around. Her eyes found me, and then they found Jackson. She went pale. Reed looked between us, slow and unsure, like he just realized he was standing on the wrong side of tripwire. Neither of us smiled. We just raised our glasses. To the end of pretending. For a few seconds after she saw me, everything froze. The restaurant noise, the clink of glasses, the murmurs of conversation, all of it faded into silence like we'd slipped into some soundproof version of reality. Her face told me more than words ever could. First confusion, then recognition, then calculation. She didn't look ashamed, just cornered. Reed, on the other hand, looked like he'd been hit with a bucket of ice water. His hand hovered midair, still reaching for the wine bottle, as if unsure whether this scene was real or part of some elaborate nightmare. Jackson sat very still beside me. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe loud. Just watch her like a man studying a collapsing building. His jaw was tight, and I could see a vein pulsing in his neck. But his voice, when he finally spoke, was calm. "She always said red meant confidence," he muttered. "Turns out it meant cheating in public." Margot didn't say a word to Reed. Instead, she stood up from her table and, heels clicking on marble, walked directly to ours. I should have prepared for this, rehearsed it, but all I could do was stare as she stood at the edge of our table like a stranger waiting to be acknowledged. She looked at me first. "Ellis," she said, voice low, like she was trying not to cause a scene. "This isn't what it looks like." I let out a short, dry laugh. "Don't insult me, Margot. You're wearing the dress I bought you for our anniversary. You're sitting with a man who isn't your husband. And you're drinking the wine we used to toast to forever." She flinched, just slightly. "You don't understand." "No," Jackson cut in. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried like a shot across the room. "You don't. Because while you were lying about late yoga classes and traffic on the I-90, I was putting our kids to bed. Alone. Telling them their mom works too hard for bedtime stories." Margot turned to him sharply. Her lips parted like she was going to protest, but nothing came out. Reed had finally stood up and was approaching slowly, his hands raised in some pathetic gesture of diplomacy. "Okay," he said. "This obviously isn't ideal, but let's not turn this into a public." "Shut up," Jackson said without even looking at him. And Reed did. The tension in the restaurant was now thick enough to chew. Diners were pretending not to watch, but forks had stopped mid-bite. The waiter who delivered the wine stood frozen near the dessert station. Margot's eyes darted between me and Jackson. You planned this. You planned this first, I replied. We just bought better seats. She was shaking now, not from guilt, from fear. Not of us, but of being exposed. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Placed it neatly in front of her on the table. Go ahead. Open it. She stared at it like it was ticking. Inside were photos. From the investigator. Her and Reed in hotel lobbies, elevators, his car. All time-stamped. All printed in 4K betrayal. Jackson slid a second envelope across the table. Yours is thicker. Margot looked like she might collapse. Then, for the first time, Reed spoke directly to her. You told me he was cold. Boring. You said he never noticed you. She said nothing. I believed you, he whispered. Jackson stood. I followed. Margot moved to stop me, but I stepped around her like she was a stranger blocking the exit. You told me you'd be home by 9, I said. You still have an hour. Use it to explain this to yourself. And with that, Jackson and I walked out together. 2 men, 1 night. But the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. I don't remember walking out of that restaurant. Not really. It felt like stepping out a movie and realizing you'd been the only real person in the theater. My legs moved, but my head was still at that table. Still watching her lips part with excuses, still hearing the dull clink of wine glasses filled with betrayal. Jackson was silent beside me, but not cold. He had that rigid kind of stillness the one men carry when they've swallowed too much dignity for too long. We stopped near the valet stand. The air was colder than I expected. You want to know something? He said, without looking at me. I almost brought her flowers tonight. Thought maybe she was just distant lately because of stress. I didn't say anything. I even Googled if early menopause could cause mood swings. He laughed bitterly. Turns out it can. But so can screwing your friend's wife. The valet brought my car around. I offered Jackson a ride, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, he got in. We didn't talk for the first 10 minutes. Then I asked the one question I had been too numb to voice earlier. Did you know it was me? He nodded. Not first, but when I saw your face tonight, it all made sense. You never met me before. I've seen your wedding photo, he said. It was in her drawer, buried under old receipts and expired coupons. You look happy. Not handsome. Not cocky. Just happy. I didn't respond. I didn't have anything left to say about who I was back then. When I dropped him off, he paused before getting out. We should talk again, he said. Not just for the drama. There's more to uncover here. Something tells me this goes deeper than just 2 stupid people screwing up. I nodded. Agreed. And that's when everything shifted. Because when I got home, the house was quiet. No lights on. No footsteps upstairs. Just a note on the counter. Don't be dramatic. I'll come back tomorrow, so we can talk like adults. I stared at it for a long time. She thought this was salvageable, negotiable, like she could come back in a blazer and break this down into bullet points. I went upstairs, opened our closet, and noticed something small but deliberate. One of the drawers was slightly open. Inside wasn't her jewelry. It was a burner phone. Not hers. Not ours. Something separate. Something secret. It had only one number saved under a fake contact name. And there were messages. Hundreds. Not just from Reed. There were others. I scrolled with a numb finger, barely processing the words. Some were recent. Some dated back months. One stood out. I think my husband suspects. He was watching me again today. My stomach flipped. That wasn't about Reed. That was me. She told someone else about me, like I was the fool in her private drama. Like I was the character she stepped over on her way to the next scene. This wasn't one affair. This was a pattern. A web. And I was the last one to realize I was standing in the middle of it. I backed out of the messages, opened the call log. 3 recent calls. 2 were outgoing. 1, at the very top, was answered. At 7:42 p.m., the exact moment she saw me at the restaurant. She called someone after she saw us. And that someone picked up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on the burner phone, the other twitching with every creak of the house. I kept replaying that moment, 7:42 p.m., over and over in my head. That precise, frozen second when she saw me, when a wine bottle hit the table, when her jaw locked. That call she made, it wasn't to Reed. And it sure as hell wasn't to me. The contact name was just a number, 812-83 XXXX. I didn't recognize it. No name, no photo. But whoever it was, they picked up on the first ring. At 2:13 a.m., I made a decision. I copied the number, transferred it to my own phone, and used a reverse lookup tool I found online. It wasn't easy. Burner numbers rarely lead anywhere. But one of the services I paid for pulled up a lead. The number was registered under a prepaid plan in the name of Brian Talcott. I froze. The name meant nothing. At first, until I remembered something buried so deep in my memory it almost felt fictional. Margot had a friend years ago, from before we were married. Someone she swore had been nothing. Just a fling, she said. Ended quickly. He moved out of state. Got into real estate. I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone has a past, right? But that name... I went back to the burner phone and searched the messages. There he was. Brian. Dozens of texts, each more nauseating than the last. You're still mine, you know. Reed is just a shield. He doesn't know you like I do. Tell me when it's safe to see you again. You've been reckless lately. I scrolled faster, my hands shaking now. There were screenshots of hotels, of calendars, of photos, some dated months ago, before Reed, some during our marriage's strong years, some from the week we adopted our dog, some when I was in the hospital for my back surgery. There was a pattern. She hadn't just cheated. She was managing a rotation. Reed wasn't a betrayal. He was just the most recent bookmark. And Brian, he was something else entirely. He was still in her life, still active, still involved enough that he was the one she called after we exposed her. And he answered, which meant he was expecting the call, which meant he knew I might show up that night, which meant, oh God, he was watching too. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't. Instead, I drove across the city toward a half-finished condo development listed under Talcott Realty Holdings. I had no plan, no script. I just knew I needed to see his face, to look him in the eyes and ask, what kind of man waits in the shadows while another man's life falls apart? But when I arrived, I found something else. The office was locked. The sign flipped to closed. But a car was parked outside. Black BMW. Engine still warm. I walked around back and found a side door slightly ajar. I shouldn't have gone in. Every instinct told me to walk away. But curiosity is louder than fear when your whole world has already fallen. Inside, the office was quiet, too quiet. I stepped carefully across the floor, past framed blueprints, mock-ups, and one large corkboard pinned with project photos. And then I saw it. A photo of me, taken from behind. At my gym. Another of me at the grocery store. One with me holding a leash, walking our dog in the park. And pinned right beside them, a picture of Margot, sitting at our kitchen counter, holding a wine glass. The timestamp said 2 weeks ago. I staggered backward, nearly knocking over a chair. I didn't just walk into an office. I walked into someone else's obsession. I walked into a plan I wasn't supposed to be part of. And suddenly, I realized Reed wasn't just being used. I was the one being watched. I backed out of that office like it was on fire. Something about the air in that place, sterile, premeditated, made my skin crawl. Not just because I saw my own image pinned to the wall like a target, but because of what it meant. Someone had been tracking me. Someone who wanted to know where I was when I was there, and probably why I hadn't noticed anything sooner. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. My car looked exactly as I'd left it, doors locked, windows rolled. But I double-checked everything before getting in. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a tracker of my own. A microphone. At this point, nothing felt impossible. I drove home without the radio on, without touching my phone, without blinking too much. I needed silence to think, to process. But even in that silence, my mind screamed. How long had Brian been watching me? How close had he gotten? Did Margot know he was tracking me? Or was that just another twisted layer in this sick mess? When I got home, the lights were on. She was back. Margot sat at the dining room table like nothing had happened. She had a glass of wine in one hand, her phone face down on the placemat, and a look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not shame, something harder, more rehearsed. I figured you'd have questions, she said calmly. I do, I replied. But I'd rather start with the ones you didn't expect. She tilted her head. Such as, who's Brian Talcott? That landed. Her hand froze midair. The wine glass didn't make it to her lips. I watched her face crack open just enough to see the truth start to leak. And she set the glass down and looked at me dead in the eye. I can explain. That was the third time she'd said those words in 48 hours. And each time, they meant less. He's not who you think he is, she said. Good, I replied. Because who I think he is someone who's been photographing me behind my back and taping you in my own house. She flinched again. That was confirmation enough. You found the phone, she whispered. I found more than the phone, I said. I found an office, and a wall, and myself, standing in pictures I don't remember anyone taking. She stood up then, suddenly animated. It's not what you think. That line again. He's not stalking you, Ellis. He was protecting me. From you. My mouth opened, but I didn't speak. Because for a brief second, I was more stunned than angry. From me? Yes, she said, almost triumphantly. You were becoming unpredictable. Cold. I didn't feel safe confronting you about our issues, so Brian stepped in. He knew people. He helped me set boundaries. I stared at her. Boundaries? Yes. Surveillance was his way of making sure things didn't spiral. That word, surveillance, hung in the air like a bad smell. And Reed, I asked, was that part of your boundary setting? She didn't answer. So I took a step forward. Quiet. Controlled. You had me followed. You let another man monitor my life. You had an affair. Maybe several. And now you're sitting here, acting like I should be grateful someone was looking out for you while you turned our marriage into a network of lies. I was scared. No, you were bored. She didn't deny it. Instead, she walked over to her bag, unzipped a pocket, and pulled out an envelope. I was going to give this to you after dinner, she said. But you found the rest already. Inside was a stack of legal documents. She'd already filed for separation. 2 weeks ago. I flipped through the pages. All the boxes checked. Everything formal. Distant. Sanitized. Except one line. Primary residence transfer to petitioner. Pending. She was trying to keep the house. My house. The one I bought before we ever met. Before her name was on the mailbox. Before her perfume soaked into the rugs and her lies wallpapered the walls. You planned this, I said quietly. She didn't deny it. You used Reed as a distraction. You used Brian as a lookout. And now you're trying to erase me from my own life like I was a mistake on your timeline. Her voice was ice now. You were a placeholder, Ellis. A convenient one. And just like that, no more denial. No more lies. Just the brutal, unrehearsed truth. But something else hit me then. A small, quiet question that hadn't occurred to me until that moment. If I was just a placeholder, who was I holding the place for? There was something chilling about the way she said it. You were a placeholder, like I'd been a chair she sat in until her real seat opened up. A pause in the story she actually wanted to be in, and now I wasn't needed. Not hated, not even disliked. Just unnecessary. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. What's the point of screaming when the person across from you no longer sees you as a person? Instead, I asked for who. She blinked, surprised. Maybe she expected rage, some kind of primal scene. But I asked calmly, Margot, who was I holding the place for? She turned away, walked toward the window, and pretended to look at nothing. But her fingers twitched. She was deciding whether to lie. Then she said it. Brian. I let the silence sit for a moment. Like a guest neither of us wanted to entertain. I never stopped loving him, she said, not even facing me. Even when I married you. He left because he had to, not because I wanted him to. He left, I said, and you married me. I needed stability. You were good to me. You were, she hesitated, safe. But Brian and I, we have history. Real history. I was shaking, not with anger, but with something heavier. I was finally realizing that every birthday, every vacation, every quiet Sunday morning we spent in bed, me thinking we were building something, was to her just waiting. Waiting for Brian to come back. Waiting for her moment to leave without being the villain. That's why the surveillance. That's why she looked me in the eye every morning and still walked away without blinking. Because in her mind, she was never with me to begin with. She was just keeping her place in line. I left the house at midnight, not to escape her, but to escape the version of myself that almost forgave her. I didn't know where to go. Hotels felt cheap. Bars felt obvious. So I drove. Just kept driving past familiar streets, gas stations, neighborhoods we used to walk through when we still bothered pretending. Somewhere around 1:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I didn't expect her to tell you, but I'm glad she did. We should talk. Face to face. It was signed BT. Brian Talcott. The man behind the lens. The man behind my marriage. The man behind everything. I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I responded with one word. Where? The reply came within seconds. The construction site. Sunrise. Come alone. I don't know why I went. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just wanted to stand in front of the man who broke into my life in the back door and ask, why me? Why this way? When I arrived at the site, it was just starting to lighten. The skeleton of a future condo tower stretched toward the gray sky like unfinished bones. And there he was, standing at the edge of the second floor, coffee in hand, like it was just another Tuesday. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just looked at me like I was late to my own reckoning. You came, he said. You invited me. We stood in silence for a moment. Then I asked it, the only question that mattered. Why did you let her marry me? He looked out over the concrete and steel. I didn't let her. She chose you. But I knew she'd come back eventually. That's what she always does. You were watching me for years. He didn't deny it. She needed to know you were still stable. Still boring. Still safe. I needed to know that too. You mean useful? He finally turned to face me. No, I mean harmless. It wasn't anger I felt then. It was understanding. I finally saw myself through their eyes. A backdrop. A financial plan. A walking alibi. A placeholder. But no more. You had your time, I said. And now it's mine. He laughed. Not mockingly. Almost approvingly. Good. Then walk away with dignity. Don't make this messy. I'm not making anything, I said. But I'm done cleaning up after the two of you. Then I turned my back on him. No final threat. No speech. Just silence. He didn't follow. When I got home, Margot was gone. So was her stuff. No note this time. Just one last voicemail, left 5 minutes before I walked in. I didn't think you'd have the spine to face him. Maybe I was wrong about that too. I'm not coming back. I think it's better for both of us. Just know I never meant to hurt you. Only to move forward. She always liked to move forward, even if it meant walking straight over me to do it. But for the first time in years, I wasn't in her shadow. I was facing the sunrise. After Margot left, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt staged. Like someone had pressed mute on my life, but left the cameras rolling. I should have felt free. I should have felt relieved. But instead, I found myself walking from room to room like a man, trying to remember what his house used to sound like before it turned into a crime scene. The coffee maker still blinked 8:04. Her robe still hung behind the bathroom door. There were little pieces of her everywhere, like the ending had come too fast to clean up properly. And then I heard it, a faint, soft vibration, coming from behind the drywall in our guest room. At first, I thought it was just the pipes. Old house. But the sound repeated. A short, pulsing buzz. 3 times in a row. Then silence. I pressed my ear to the wall. It was definitely coming from inside. There had always been this odd hollow space between the studs behind the bookcase. Years ago, during a renovation, I'd found that the original builder left a vertical pocket behind the plaster, but we never did anything with it. We just sealed it up and forgot. I didn't forget anymore. I got a flashlight, pulled out a utility knife, and carefully cut through the painted drywall panel. Behind it was a narrow wooden cavity no wider than a shoebox, and at the bottom sat a locked black file case. It was cold, heavier than it looked. The lock was basic. I popped it with a flathead in under 10 seconds. Inside were 2 things. A prepaid phone, a stack of manila folders marked Project, Cedar. My pulse kicked like a drum. I opened the folders one by one. The contents were unreal. Spreadsheets, bank transfers, photocopies of real estate transactions with both Brian's and Margot's names listed under shell corporations. A property listed under Larch Grove Partners, LLC, matched a building downtown I'd walked past every day for 5 years. Another, under Marabri Holdings, had signatures from both of them, Margot in 2017, Brian in 2019. One page even listed me by name as an unaware financial proxy. They used my credit, my salary, my tax filings. There were forged applications for lines of credit under my name, cleverly masked as joint financial ventures I supposedly consented to. And then at the bottom of the stack, a blueprint, not of a building, of a plan, written in Margot's handwriting. Numbered steps. Build narrative of emotional distance. Begin soft exit strategy. Transfer titles. Phase out presence. Incite final trigger for legal exit. Pivot image to victim of emotional manipulation. Reposition assets via separate entities. I nearly dropped the folder. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a strategy. She had mapped me like a war zone. The trigger wasn't her guilt. It was me catching her. That dinner wasn't an accident. It was the final act in a long-planned exit, a test to see if I'd finally react, so she could flip the script and leave as the wounded spouse. And the worst part? She was good at it. That voicemail she left, the whole "I never meant to hurt you" routine, it was pre-recorded. It had a timestamp from 3 days before our confrontation at the restaurant. She knew I would find her. She counted on it. I didn't sleep again. Instead, I opened the prepaid phone. One contact. Unknown. 719-555 XXXX. I called it. It rang once, then disconnected. 2 minutes later, the phone buzzed with a text. You were never supposed to see that file. Another message followed seconds later. If you keep pushing, you'll be seen as unstable. Walk away. Quietly. And then, final warning, Ellis. You weren't the target. You were the cover. I stood there in the dark with the phone in one hand and the blueprint in the other, realizing that I hadn't been betrayed by a person. I had been used by a machine. This wasn't about love. This was about leverage. And now, for the first time, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was dangerous. They told me to walk away quietly. They said I wasn't the target, just the cover. That I wasn't meant to see the blueprint or the photos or the truth about what my marriage actually was. And for the first time in a long time, I agreed with them. I wasn't the target. I was the escape route they thought would never collapse. They built their entire scheme on one assumption, that I wouldn't notice. That I'd keep playing my part, keep holding the line, keep being the reliable, dull man in the corner who asks no questions. But they forgot something crucial. A man who loses everything finally has nothing left to fear. The next day, I didn't answer the phone. I didn't chase Margot. I didn't contact Brian. I contacted my lawyer. It was the first time I said the words out loud. I want to initiate a forensic audit. Every bank account, every joint asset, every shared signature, and suspicious withdrawal. I laid it all out. Photos, documents, the burner phone, the timeline. The attorney looked at me like I was waking up from a coma. Ellis, he said, you've got more than just a divorce case here. This is premeditated financial fraud. Possibly conspiracy. I didn't flinch. I'm not interested in revenge. I just want my name back. He nodded. Then we begin today. What followed was 3 months of relentless untangling. But what surprised me most was how quickly Margot folded. When presented with the evidence, she didn't fight. She didn't cry. She didn't even lie. She signed everything. Quietly. Without resistance. She turned over her claims to the house. Canceled her name from every joint account. Even surrendered the Larch Grove property title, knowing the trail led straight to her and Brian's illegal transfers. And just like that, her plan collapsed. Her relationship with Brian? Shaky at best. According to my lawyer's sources, they're no longer speaking. Apparently, once the audit began, Brian vanished from their shared investments like a ghost before daylight. No more burner phones. No more smug texts. Just digital silence. She was left alone, exactly how she had left me. But this story isn't about her anymore. It's about what came after. I sold the house. Not out of spite. I just didn't want to live in rooms where every wall had heard lies. I moved into a smaller place. A loft near the lake. Quiet. Clean. Sunlight everywhere. And silence. The kind that feels earned. I reconnected with people I hadn't seen in years. A college friend. My sister. Even Jackson. The man whose life exploded the same night mine did. Turns out, shared ruin builds uncommon friendships. He and I meet once a month now. Not to talk about them, but to remind ourselves that we survived, that we're building something better. One morning, I made coffee stepped onto the small balcony, and looked out over the water. The world felt simple again. And for the first time in over a decade, no one was watching me. No one was tracking me. No one was using me. I was no longer a placeholder. I was a man with no script. And I'd never felt more real.